I'm Justin Czar with bowhunting.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at the differences and the similarities between a compound bow and a crossbow. We're going to compare and contrast the different features and benefits of each one, and we're going to allow you, the viewer, to make the decision on which weapon you want to carry into the field this fall. So let's get started. So for the purposes of today's video, we are not going to declare a winner on which weapon is best, because ultimately it's up to the personal decision of the hunter that's going into the woods, which one suits their hunting styles and their needs the best. But what we are going to do today is we're going to take a look at a lot of the different features and see how they compare between the two weapons and see which ones are better than others, right? So let's just start with some of the easy stuff, right? We've got a compound bow here. I've got a Mathews VXR. We've got a pair of crossbows here. I've got a Mission Sub 1 and I've got a Raven R29, right? When we look at these crossbows and this compound bow, one of the first things people always want to talk about and focus on is going to be the speed. And there's no doubt about it, when it comes to the speed of a bow and the speed of your arrow, the crossbow is going to win almost every time. Today's crossbows are shooting in the high 300 feet per second to the mid 400 feet per second range, which is substantially faster than pretty much any compound bow on the market. This bow here is a 330 foot per second bow is what it shoots, whereas these bows are, again, high 380s, low 400s. So the speed department is definitely won by the crossbow. However, as we all know as bow hunters, speed isn't what kills. Accuracy is what kills, right? You have to hit your target on the right spot in order to be an effective and efficient hunter. So when it comes to accuracy, which one of these weapons wins? Ultimately, I believe that it's a draw. Any one of these bows, whether it's a compound or a crossbow, is more than capable of being extremely accurate in the hands of the right shooter. And I think that's the most important thing, right? I will give a slight nod to the crossbow in terms of general accuracy for one reason, right? A crossbow has a lot less variables when you shoot it, right? So because of the way that a crossbow is designed, when you cock this thing back and then you pull the trigger to shoot it, you don't have to worry about torque like you do with a compound bow. You don't necessarily have to worry about things like cam timing and rest tuning and all these other things that you need to worry about in order to get a compound bow to shoot properly, right? So there's a few less variables, which is why you see hunters or even non-hunters being able to pick up a crossbow and shoot it very accurately in a very short period of time. So we'll give the slight nod to the crossbow in terms of maybe ease of shooting and the learning curve, the shortness of the learning curve of being able to pick it up. However, there's no doubt that today's modern compound bows shoot better than ever before. I've personally witnessed people that have never shot a bow in their lives within 30 minutes or an hour of very basic instruction and being able to get fitted for the bow that's a proper size and weight for them, be able to be deadly accurate, like hunting accurate within an hour. So it's not that much of a difference between the two, but there is certainly a slight nod to the crossbow. Now, the one thing that I will say is if you are going to go hunting with any of these weapons, you need to practice, and you need to practice a lot. That is the best way to ensure that you are going to be accurate in a high pressure situation. It doesn't matter which one of these weapons you are shooting. If you are going out in the woods as a bow hunter, you owe it to yourself and to the game animals that you are pursuing to practice and be very proficient. Don't think that you can just pick up a crossbow, take a couple shots with it, hit the bullseye at 20 yards, and be good to go hunting, right? Because that is not the case. And I think that's a common misconception about crossbows and people that hunt with crossbows, is that they don't practice and they just go out in the woods and start shooting arrows all over the place. As a responsible and ethical sportsman, you should be practicing a lot with whatever weapon you choose to hunt with. While we're talking about accuracy and the ease of shooting these weapons, let's talk about effective range in a bow hunting situation, because I believe this is another common misconception that people have about the differences between a crossbow and a compound bow. Most people are hunting white-tailed deer, so we're going to use white-tailed deer as kind of our control group for our examples. The vast majority of bow hunters that you talk to are going to say max effective range on a whitetail with a compound bow is going to be about 40 yards. Now, there are going to be some folks that will shoot beyond that, some that don't shoot quite that far, but 40 yards seems to be the pretty kind of de facto standard for most bow hunters these days. When it comes to crossbows, you've seen some of them marketed as, you know, your next rifle or a 100-yard shooting device. And there's no doubt about it. You know, these crossbows are certainly capable of being extremely accurate at long ranges. But accuracy at long ranges doesn't necessarily translate into the ability to hunt with them at those ranges. Most experts, including a lot of the crossbow manufacturers, are going to tell you that these crossbows are still a 40 or 50 yard and in weapon when you are hunting whitetails. So the effective range isn't that much more. And the reason for that is, regardless of how fast these weapons shoot, there's a lot of variables in a hunting situation. Number one, the hunter. Your blood is flowing, your heart is pumping, you've got a lot of adrenaline going, so your accuracy at those longer ranges is going to be diminished in a hunting situation for the vast majority of people. And then you have the animal itself. The ability of that animal to move at the sound of an arrow speeding its way is unparalleled. And unless you are shooting a firearm, there's nothing you're going to do to stop the movement of that animal. And the farther you get out there, the more that animal is able to move. So again, when we start talking effective range of these weapons for white-tailed deer, you know, and I'm generalizing here because everybody's going to have their own opinion on what the right number is. But the majority of people you talk to are going to be about 40 yards with a compound bow, and you're looking at 40 to 50 yards with a crossbow. So slight nod to the crossbow, but again, it's got to be in the hands of the right shooter under the right circumstances. Most people that I know that hunt with a crossbow, myself included, are still sticking to 30 and 40 yards. I'm telling you what, those 50-plus yard shots at any animal, especially a whitetail, are pretty dang far and are not for everybody. So effective range boils down to the shooter, but really in the end, they're not much different between these weapons. Now we're going to dive into a few areas where I personally feel like the compound bow really outshines the crossbow, right? The first thing is going to be weight. This is my hunting bow for this year. As I said, it's a Matthews VXR. I've got a pretty big heavy sight on the front of this thing. I've got a pretty big heavy stabilizer on the front of this thing. This bow right here, set up as you see, weighs 6.5 pounds. These crossbows here weigh between 8.5 and 9 pounds. So as you can see, the weight of the bow is significantly less. Yes, I know it's only 2.5 pounds, but if we look at it as a percentage of the weight, this bow is about 25 to 30% less weight than a crossbow. So they are definitely a little bit easier to carry around the woods with you. So weight is one area that a compound bow is certainly going to outshine a crossbow. Number two is just going to be the maneuverability of these bows, right? I understand that, you know, today's crossbows are significantly narrower and have a much smaller footprint than the ones of days gone by when it was basically a vertical, you know, a big bow or a horizontal bow out here, and these things took up a lot of space. And these things are significantly more maneuverable today than they used to be, but there's no doubt about it. You get up in a tree stand with any of these weapons, and you're going to pick the compound bow 10 out of 10 times. These crossbows are really good for ground blinds or hunting off the ground, but I'm going to tell you right now, getting up in a tree stand, I give the nod to the compound bow 10 out of 10 times. Two other areas where the compound bow really outshines the crossbow is, number one, going to be noise. When you shoot a compound bow, it is significantly quieter than a crossbow. And the reason for that is very simple. Crossbows are generating a lot more power, a lot more energy, and a lot more speed. That comes with a trade-off of a lot more noise. You know, today's crossbows are significantly quieter than they were in the past. They have a lot of string dampening and silencing on them that you can see kind of built into these bows now, but I tell you what, they are still considerably louder than a compound bow, which kind of brings me to my next point, which is going to be follow-up shots, right? In the majority of hunting situations, a crossbow is a single shot weapon. It's going to be very difficult for anybody to shoot and possibly miss an animal with a crossbow and then be able to recock that bow and get an arrow on it quick enough, quiet enough, without a lot of movement in order to get another shot. It certainly can happen, but I'll tell you what, it's going to happen a lot more with a compound bow than it's going to with a crossbow. Especially, I go back to this tree stand thing because we're talking about whitetails, mostly in the Midwest here. A lot of our hunting is done out of tree stands. Trying to cock a crossbow while you're standing on a smaller tree stand platform is a very, very difficult thing to do. I have some personal experience with that, so I'll give the nod to the compound bow again, just in terms of noise and the ability to take a follow-up shot in the event that one is needed. The last point we're going to talk about today, and this is one that gets brought up a lot in discussions or arguments online about crossbows, is drawing back of the crossbow before you need to shoot. And what I mean by that is these crossbows are cocked and loaded when you get to your stand or get to your ground blind, so you do not need to draw them back before you shoot the animal. It's one of the big things that the opponents of crossbows cite as a reason that they shouldn't be allowed in bow season, whereas with your compound bow or even a traditional archery, the physical act of drawing the bow back and having to shoot at your target at the time creates an opportunity for the animal to see you and spook and allow you to not get a shot off. So there is certainly an advantage to a crossbow in that particular case, especially in colder weather, where you maybe have a lot of clothing on or your body is kind of stiffened and tightened up because it is so cold out. There's certainly an advantage to the crossbow in those particular situations. But what I will also say is the crossbow allows a lot more people who can't hunt with a compound bow to get out in the woods, right? So the young children that can't draw enough weight with a compound bow, but they can get out in the woods with a crossbow, or even people with shoulder problems, or some of the aging hunters out there that just can't quite do the compound anymore. The crossbow is a great alternative to be able to keep them in the woods longer, or to get them in the woods a little bit earlier. My son will be hunting with a crossbow for the first time this fall. He's 8. He's not old enough or big enough to be able to draw back enough weight with a compound bow, but he can shoot a crossbow, and it's allowing me to spend some extra time and get him in the woods. So the advantage definitely goes to the crossbow. However, what I will say in this particular case is I think a lot of people act like drawing a bow back at the time that you need to shoot an animal is a very, very difficult thing, and it's a game changer. And while it certainly has cost more than a few people, myself included, a shot at an animal, I think it's one of those items that maybe is overblown a little bit. There's plenty of people out there killing deer or other animals every year with a compound or traditional bow that have no problem drawing back. So long as you wait until the animal isn't on alert and looking at you, it's focused on something else, it's head behind a tree, it's feeding, it's doing whatever. Usually, in most cases, you don't have any problems drawing the bow back to get a shot off. So, as somebody who has hunted with both of these weapons, I've been hunting with a compound bow since I was 12, so 28 years now I've been hunting with a compound bow. The last 5 or 6 I've taken the crossbow out with me since it's been legal here in Illinois. I finally shot my first animal with a crossbow last year, and I got just as much enjoyment out of doing it with the crossbow as I would have with my compound bow. But I can tell you there's definitely pros and cons to each one of these. I think there's a lot of people out there that feel like these crossbows are too powerful, too easy, too fast, too whatever to be used during an archery season. But I've also found that most of those people have never actually taken one of these into the woods with them and tried to hunt with it to understand what the experience is like. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was just some of the pros and cons of a crossbow versus a compound bow. Again, I leave it up to the individual hunter, the individual shooter to decide which one of these works best for you. And maybe you're going to find there's certain situations that a compound bow works better. Maybe all your tree stand hunting during October and November, you're going to bring the compound with you. And then maybe once December hits and it's late season and it's super cold, maybe you're hunting in a ground blind or a box blind or just off the ground, and you feel like a crossbow is a better fit for you, by all means, go for it. So long as it's legal in your state, we don't care what weapon you are hunting with. We just hope you pick the right one and you practice and you have a safe season and you are successful this fall. So appreciate everybody watching. Of course, we encourage you to leave your comments below, and we'll see you next time with another great Bowhunt 101 video.